Maxine Waters thought she could intimidate a combat veteran. She forgot Tulsi Gabbard has access to everything. The 86-year-old California congresswoman had ruled her district like a queen for 40 years, untouchable and unchallenged. But when she called the director of national intelligence a Russian puppet and traitor on live television, she made the biggest mistake of her political career. Tulsi Gabbard's response was deadly calm. "Congresswoman Waters, let's discuss your $4.5 million mansion and how you afforded it on a congressional salary. What happened next exposed 40 years of corruption, violence, and treason that will end Maxine Waters forever. Smash that like button because you're about to witness the most devastating political takedown in American history. This decorated Iraq War veteran is about to expose everything with classified intelligence that will shock you to your core." Maxine Waters had terrorized American politics for 4 decades. She wielded accusations like weapons: racism, bigotry, xenophobia. Anyone who questioned her vanished under an avalanche of character assassination and media protection. She'd built an empire on the ashes of communities she claimed to defend, growing wealthier while her district crumbled into poverty and chaos. But empires built on lies eventually face their reckoning. And Tulsi Gabbard was that reckoning personified. The morning began like any other in Waters' world. Her staff had arranged the MSNBC appearance weeks ago. A friendly platform, sympathetic hosts, the perfect stage to destroy this upstart veteran who dared assume control of America's intelligence apparatus. Waters had destroyed bigger threats than Tulsi Gabbard. She'd ended careers with a single press conference. She'd buried investigations with phone calls. She'd made senators grovel with threats of primary challenges. This would be easy. This would be fun. Waters sat in her office that morning, reviewing attack talking points her team had prepared. Russian asset, white supremacist, warmonger, the usual arsenal that had obliterated so many opponents. Her chief of staff, a nervous man named Marcus who'd served her for 17 years, brought her morning coffee with trembling hands. "Congresswoman, are you sure about today?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Director Gabbard has access to everything. Maybe we should." "Maybe we should what?" Waters snapped, her eyes flashing with the fire that had intimidated staffers for generations. "Back down. Show weakness. I've been doing this since before she was born, Marcus. I know exactly what I'm doing." But Marcus couldn't shake the dread pooling in his stomach. He'd seen the intelligence reports crossing Waters' desk. He'd watched her face go pale when certain names appeared in briefings. He'd witnessed late-night phone calls conducted in whispered tones, conversations that ended the moment he entered the room. Marcus had served Maxine Waters loyally for nearly 2 decades, but loyalty couldn't erase what he'd seen. The foreign visitors who arrived after midnight. The encrypted phones she thought no one knew about. The offshore account statements she'd accidentally left on her desk once, showing balances that made his blood run cold. "You're right, Congresswoman," Marcus finally said, retreating with the coward's acknowledgement of power. "You always are." Waters smiled, the predator's smile she'd perfected over decades of political warfare. Today would cement her legacy. Today she would destroy Tulsi Gabbard's credibility so completely that the intelligence community would demand her resignation. Today the empire would grow stronger. Across town, in a secure facility buried beneath concrete and steel, Tulsi Gabbard sat in a different kind of morning meeting. The director of National Intelligence conference room held representatives from every American intelligence agency: CIA, NSA, FBI, DIA, DEA, ATF, Homeland Security, military intelligence. They'd been gathering evidence for 8 months, building a case so airtight that even the most corrupt judge couldn't dismiss it. "Ma'am, the warrant executions are ready," said FBI Deputy Director Sarah Chen, a woman whose own parents had lost their business in the 1992 riots Waters had inflamed. "The moment you give the word, we hit 17 locations simultaneously." Tulsi studied the photographs spread across the conference table. 40 years of corruption distilled into damning images. Bank transfers, property deeds, meeting photographs with foreign agents, intercepted communications, dead bodies, missing children. The scope of Waters' criminality was so vast it had taken a multi-agency task force working around the clock just to document it all. "She's going to attack me on television this morning," Tulsi said quietly, her eyes never leaving the evidence. "She's going to call me a traitor, a Russian asset, probably worse. She thinks the media will protect her like they always have." "Will you engage?" asked CIA Director James Mitchell, a career intelligence officer who'd watched congressional corruption enable enemy operations for 3 decades. "Or should we wait for a more controlled environment?" Tulsi looked up, and everyone in the room saw something that made them glad she was on America's side. Not anger, not revenge, just absolute, unwavering commitment to justice. "She's attacking me on live television because she thinks I won't fight back in public," Tulsi replied. "She thinks I'll respect the usual protocols, keep classified information classified, play by the rules she spent 40 years breaking. She's counting on my integrity to protect her corruption." "And," Chen prompted, "and she's about to learn that protecting America sometimes requires exposing its enemies, even when those enemies hide behind congressional credentials," Tulsi said, standing with military bearing that filled the room with authority. "Execute the warrants the moment I begin presenting evidence. I want her offices, her homes, her fake community centers, everything hit simultaneously. No warning, no escape routes. When America watches her empire crumble, they'll see the physical proof being loaded into evidence trucks in real time." The plan was audacious, unprecedented. The Director of National Intelligence publicly declassifying evidence to expose a sitting member of Congress during a live television ambush. But everyone in that room had seen American soldiers die because of Waters' intelligence leaks. Everyone had reviewed case files of children who'd vanished while Waters protected their traffickers. Everyone understood that sometimes justice required extraordinary measures. "Rules of engagement," asked an NSA representative. "Document everything," Tulsi ordered. "Body cameras on every agent, multiple angles on every raid. I want the American people to see exactly what we find in her world. No editing, no spin. Raw footage of 40 years of stolen wealth and criminal infrastructure." She gathered the classified folders, each one representing a different category of Waters' treason: financial crimes, incitement of violence, foreign intelligence activities, protection of criminal networks, complicity in trafficking. The weight of American suffering compressed into manila folders marked with the highest classification levels in the intelligence community. "One more thing," Tulsi added, pausing at the conference room door. "When this is over, when Waters is in custody and her network is dismantled, I want a complete review of how she got away with this for 40 years. Who protected her? Which officials looked the other way? Which media organizations buried stories about her corruption? We're not just taking down one criminal today. We're exposing an entire system that enabled her." The room erupted in grim acknowledgement. This was bigger than Maxine Waters. This was about sending a message that would echo through every corridor of power in America. The age of consequence-free corruption was ending. Tulsi arrived at the MSNBC studios in Rockefeller Center 45 minutes before airtime. Security swept her twice, standard protocol for someone with access to the nation's deepest secrets. The classified folders went into a special secure case that never left her sight. Inside those folders was evidence that would rewrite American political history. In her dressing room, Tulsi sat in absolute stillness, a meditation technique she'd learned during her military service, centering her mind before combat. Because that's what this was: combat. Not with bullets and bombs, but with truth and evidence. A different kind of warfare, but warfare nonetheless. Her phone buzzed with a secure message from the FBI command center. "All raid teams in position, awaiting your signal, standing by." Tulsi typed back a single word: "Ready." Meanwhile, Maxine Waters was holding court in her own dressing room like a queen preparing for a coronation. Staffers fawned over her. Makeup artists perfected her appearance. A speechwriter reviewed attack lines one final time. "Remember," the speechwriter coached, "connect her military service to imperialism. Connect her intelligence role to authoritarianism. Make the audience feel like she's a threat to democracy itself. Waters nodded, drinking in the strategy like a vampire feeding on blood. She destroyed so many careers with these exact tactics. Deflect from your own corruption by attacking your opponent's character. Make them defend themselves. Control the narrative. Win. And if she brings up any of the old allegations, a nervous staffer asked. There are no allegations, only racist smears. Waters responded automatically. The deflection so practiced it came without conscious thought. 40 years of Republicans trying to destroy a powerful black woman. The audience will see right through it. But in the quiet corner of her mind that Waters usually silenced with ego and denial, a small voice whispered warnings. Tulsi Gabbard wasn't a Republican trying to score political points. She was a combat veteran with security, clearance levels Waters couldn't even imagine. She commanded agencies that had toppled foreign governments. She had access to intelligence that revealed secrets Waters thought were buried forever. Waters crushed that voice of doubt like she'd crushed so many enemies. Fear was weakness. Doubt was defeat. She was Maxine Waters, untouchable, unstoppable, invincible. The television studio pulsed with the familiar energy of live broadcast preparation. Cameras positioned, lights calibrated, audio levels checked. Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski reviewed their notes, blissfully unaware that their morning show was about to broadcast the political equivalent of a nuclear detonation. Okay, we've got Congresswoman Waters and Director Gabbard for the Intelligence Oversight segment, a producer briefed the hosts. Standard format, 10-minute discussion on intelligence community reforms and congressional oversight. Should be straightforward policy talk. Scarborough nodded, scanning his prepared questions. He'd interviewed both women before. Waters was always good television, passionate and quotable. Gabbard was disciplined and thoughtful, sometimes too cautious for great television but always substantive. This should be a solid segment. Any special considerations? Brzezinski asked. Waters requested the joint appearance, the producer noted. Her office specifically wanted to discuss oversight issues alongside the new DNI. They've got some concerns about intelligence community transparency. Neither host recognized the setup. Waters had specifically engineered this confrontation, chosen this platform, selected this moment. She was the hunter arranging the perfect ambush. She just didn't realize she was actually the prey. Tulsi Gabbard entered the studio carrying her secure briefcase. Waters was already seated, exuding confidence and barely concealed contempt. For just a moment, their eyes met across the stage. Waters saw a young veteran playing at intelligence work, in over her head, about to be destroyed. Tulsi saw 40 years of American suffering about to receive justice. Director Gabbard, Congresswoman Waters, thank you both for joining us, Scarborough began as the cameras went live. We're discussing intelligence community oversight and the balance between security and transparency. Director Gabbard, you've been in the role for 6 months now. What have been your biggest challenges? Tulsi responded with measured professionalism, discussing the complexity of coordinating 18 intelligence agencies while maintaining constitutional protections and operational effectiveness. She spoke like someone who'd actually read the Constitution, actually understood the oath she'd taken, actually believed in the principles that made America worth defending. Waters listened with barely concealed impatience, waiting for her moment to strike. She'd let Gabbard talk herself into a corner, establish herself as the intelligence establishment, and then Waters would unleash the accusation that would end her career. Russian asset, the ultimate political weapon in modern America. Congresswoman Waters, you've been a vocal critic of intelligence community practices, particularly regarding surveillance of minority communities, Brzezinski prompted. What are your concerns with the current leadership? This was it. The opening Waters had orchestrated. She turned to face the camera with the righteous indignation she'd perfected over 4 decades of political theater. Mika, I think we need to address what everyone's thinking but nobody wants to say, Waters began, her voice dripping with practiced accusation. We have a director of national intelligence who many believe has been compromised by foreign powers. The temperature in the studio dropped like someone had opened a door to winter. Scarborough's eyes widened. Brzezinski froze mid-breath. The production staff in the control room stared at their monitors in shock. Waters continued, building momentum like a prosecuting attorney who'd rehearsed her closing argument 1,000 times. Tulsi Gabbard has a long history of supporting Russian talking points. She's opposed sanctions on Putin's regime. She's questioned American support for our allies. She's been called Putin's favorite American politician by intelligence experts. Each accusation landed like an artillery shell, designed to destroy credibility through sheer repetitive force. Waters had used this technique for decades. Say something often enough, loudly enough, and people start believing it regardless of truth. Furthermore, Waters pressed on, her voice rising with theatrical outrage. I believe Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian puppet, a traitor to this country, and frankly, a white supremacist sympathizer who has absolutely no business accessing our nation's most sensitive secrets. The words hung in the air like poison. Russian puppet, traitor, white supremacist sympathizer. Waters had just deployed the complete arsenal of career-ending accusations on live national television. She sat back with satisfaction, confident that Gabbard would now spend the rest of the segment defending herself. The media would run with the allegations, and by evening, calls for Gabbard's resignation would dominate the news cycle. This was how you destroyed an enemy in modern America. Not with evidence, but with accusation. Not with truth, but with narrative. For exactly 5 seconds, Tulsi Gabbard sat in perfect stillness. The camera operators would later describe it as the most unsettling silence they'd ever witnessed on live television. Not angry silence, not shocked silence. The silence of a warrior calculating the most effective way to end a threat. When Tulsi finally spoke, her voice carried the cold precision of someone who'd faced actual enemies in actual combat and watched them fall. Congresswoman Waters. Each word was enunciated with surgical precision, the verbal equivalent of a sniper acquiring a target. Since you want to discuss foreign compromise and treason on national television, let's do this properly. Tulsi reached for her secure briefcase with deliberate, measured movements. Every person watching felt the shift in power dynamics like a physical force. The hunter was becoming prey in real time. Let's discuss your $4.5 million mansion in Hancock Park and how exactly you afforded it on a congressional salary of $174,000 per year. Waters' face twitched, just a micro-expression, barely noticeable, but captured in high definition by 3 different camera angles. The predator had just heard the trap snap shut. Tulsi opened her briefcase and withdrew the first folder, marked with official DNI classification stamps visible to every camera. Let's discuss One United Bank and the $12 million in taxpayer money you steered to your husband's business interests during the 2008 financial crisis. Another folder emerged, this one thicker. Let's discuss the riots you've incited over 30 years that left Americans dead in the streets. A third folder. Let's discuss the foreign money flowing through your district from Chinese intelligence operations, Haitian oligarchs, and Mexican cartels. A fourth folder. Let's discuss the missing children, over 3,000 in the past decade alone, who vanished from your district while you protected the gangs and traffickers who prey on them. A fifth folder, this one marked with the highest classification levels. And let's discuss why multiple foreign intelligence agencies, including China's Ministry of State Security, Russia's FSB, and Iran's MOIS, have active files listing you as a recruited asset who's provided classified American intelligence in exchange for money and political support. The studio had gone completely silent. Every producer, every camera operator, every technician stood frozen, watching the systematic destruction of a political career in real time. Waters' mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. Her carefully prepared attacks had evaporated like morning dew under a desert sun. She'd walked into an ambush far more sophisticated than anything she'd imagined possible. "This is outrageous," Waters finally sputtered, her voice cracking with the first real fear she'd felt in 40 years. You can't just make wild accusations without evidence. I'm not making accusations, Tulsi interrupted with the authority of someone who commanded America's entire intelligence apparatus. I'm presenting evidence, declassified evidence, evidence that will be made publicly available within the hour. She held up the first folder so the camera could clearly see the markings. Congressional corruption, Maxine Waters, financial crimes, classified intelligence assessment, authorized for declassification by the Director of National Intelligence. Tulsi opened the folder like a prosecutor revealing evidence to a jury. Congresswoman Waters, as Director of National Intelligence, I have the authority to declassify any information I determine to be in the public interest. And exposing a 40-year pattern of corruption, foreign influence, and treason by a sitting member of Congress. That's absolutely in the public interest. She placed the first document on the table between them, angled so the cameras could capture every detail. Now, shall we start with how you really built your fortune? Or would you prefer to retract your baseless accusations and end this interview before I expose every crime you've committed over the past 4 decades? Waters' face had gone pale, sweat beading on her forehead, despite the studio's careful climate control. She looked like a defendant watching the prosecution present evidence she thought had been destroyed years ago. This is a setup, Waters stammered. This is a political hit job. This is justice, Tulsi corrected with devastating calm. Something you've avoided for 40 years, but not today. Today, America learns the truth about Maxine Waters. Tulsi pulled out her secure phone and typed a single message to the FBI command center. Execute. Across Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and 3 other states, federal agents simultaneously breached 17 locations connected to Maxine Waters' criminal network. Front doors crashed open. Search warrants were served. Body cameras captured every moment as agents swarmed through Waters' mansion, her congressional offices, her fake community centers, and the homes of her associates. In the MSNBC studio, Tulsi checked her phone as confirmation messages flooded in. Raid in progress appeared 17 times in rapid succession. Oh, and Congresswoman, Tulsi added with a slight smile, federal agents are currently executing search warrants at your home, your offices, and every property connected to your criminal enterprise. What they find will corroborate everything I'm about to reveal. Waters looked like she might vomit. 40 years of carefully constructed corruption collapsing in real time, live on national television, with no escape route and no protection. Let's begin with One United Bank, Tulsi announced, opening the first folder completely. The American people deserve to know how their congresswoman turned the 2008 financial crisis into a personal enrichment scheme, while millions of Americans lost their homes. Scarborough and Brzezinski sat in stunned silence, journalists witnessing history but too shocked to even think of questions. This had stopped being an interview. This was a public prosecution. Tulsi produced the first piece of evidence, a Treasury Department analysis marked with official seals. September 2008, the American financial system is in freefall. Lehman Brothers has collapsed. Bear Stearns is gone. Major banks are failing every week. Millions of Americans are losing their homes and life savings. She placed the document where cameras could see it clearly. And what was Congresswoman Waters doing during this national crisis? She was arranging a private meeting between Treasury officials and One United Bank executives. Specifically and exclusively One United Bank, not a general meeting with minority-owned banks, not a National Bankers Association forum. A private meeting specifically for One United Bank. Tulsi looked directly at Waters. Want to tell America why One United Bank was so special to you, Congresswoman, or should I? Waters remained silent, trapped like an animal that had finally run out of escape options. Your husband, Sidney Williams, was a board member of One United Bank. He personally held $350,000 in bank stock. And in September 2008, as the financial crisis deepened, One United Bank was on the verge of complete collapse. Tulsi produced phone records, emails, and meeting schedules. On September 9, 2008, you personally called Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson's office demanding an urgent meeting. When his staff suggested a general meeting with multiple minority-owned banks, you specifically insisted it be One United only. The documentary evidence was devastating. Emails showing Waters' staff coordinating the meeting. Phone logs capturing her increasingly frantic calls as One United's situation deteriorated. Meeting notes documenting how Waters had leveraged her position on the House Financial Services Committee to secure access other banks couldn't get. September 17, 2008, the meeting happens, Tulsi continued. One United executives meet with Treasury officials. You personally attend and advocate for federal bailout funds for this failing bank. A bank where your husband is on the board. A bank where your family has hundreds of thousands of dollars at risk. She produced the next document, this one from the Treasury Department's Special Inspector General for TARP. Treasury officials specifically noted the conflict of interest in their contemporaneous meeting notes. One official wrote, and I quote, "Congresswoman Waters' personal financial interest in One United Bank is obvious and troubling. This meeting should not have occurred, but the meeting did occur, and the results were immediate and profitable for the Waters family. Within weeks of your intervention, One United Bank received $12 million in federal TARP bailout funds," Tulsi announced. 12 million taxpayer dollars that were supposed to save the American financial system went to a bank that was deeply troubled, poorly managed, and had been cited for unsafe banking practices. She displayed Federal Reserve examinations showing One United Bank had been operating with serious deficiencies for years. This bank had no business receiving federal funds. It was one of the worst performing banks in America. But it got $12 million because Maxine Waters made it happen. The corruption was clear and undeniable. Waters had used her position on the House Financial Services Committee to steer federal bailout money to a bank where her husband served as a board member and held significant personal financial interests. Now, here's where it gets even more corrupt, Tulsi continued. In 2009, after the bailout, your husband's One United Bank stock was worth significantly more than it would have been had the bank failed. Conservative estimates put his personal benefit at over $300,000, money he only kept because you steered taxpayer funds to save his investment. Financial analysis showed that without the federal bailout, One United would have collapsed, and the Waters family would have lost everything they'd invested. Instead, the bailout preserved their wealth while millions of Americans lost their homes. But this wasn't an isolated incident, Tulsi revealed. My investigation uncovered a 20-year pattern of you using your position on the Financial Services Committee to benefit banks that made contributions to your campaigns and business deals with your family. She produced a comprehensive chart showing the pattern. Bank executives make contributions to Waters' campaign. Right arrow Waters advocates for federal assistance to those banks. Right arrow banks receive federal money. Bank executives make more contributions. Between 2000 and 2020, Waters' campaigns received over $2.8 million from executives of minority-owned banks that received federal assistance after her intervention. The correlation was undeniable. That's legal campaign fundraising, Waters protested weakly, her voice barely audible. Legal campaign fundraising that followed an obvious quid pro quo pattern, Tulsi countered. You sold your influence. They bought access, and taxpayer money went to banks that had paid for your services. But the financial corruption went far beyond One United Bank. Now let's discuss your real estate empire, Tulsi said, producing property records from Los Angeles County and multiple other jurisdictions. You own a $4.5 million mansion in Hancock Park, one of Los Angeles' most exclusive neighborhoods. Notably, it's outside your district. You also own multiple other properties valued at over $6 million total. Property photographs appeared on screens behind them, showing Waters' palatial mansion, her rental properties, her investment holdings. Your husband owns additional properties worth millions more. Combined, Your family controls a real estate portfolio worth over $10 million. Tulsi leaned forward, the prosecutor approaching the kill. Congresswoman Waters, you've been in Congress since 1991. Your congressional salary is $174,000 per year. Over 34 years, that's approximately $6 million in total pre-tax salary. Your husband is a former football player who became a car salesman and later worked in minority banking. Tax returns appeared on screen, official IRS documents declassified for this presentation. Your husband's declared income has never exceeded $200,000 in any single year. Most years it was substantially less. So let me ask the obvious question. Where did the money come from? The numbers didn't add up, and Tulsi systematically proved it. Treasury Department financial forensics experts analyzed your family's finances. They found systematic patterns of money flowing from banks you'd helped, through various LLCs and trusts, eventually ending up financing your real estate purchases. Shell companies appeared on screen, complex financial networks designed to obscure money trails. But intelligence agencies had unraveled every connection. For example, in 2006, you purchased your Hancock Park mansion for $4.5 million. The down payment of $900,000 came from a series of wire transfers traced back to accounts controlled by executives from banks you'd helped secure federal assistance in previous years. The money trail was documented with bank records, wire transfer receipts, and corporate filings. This is what corruption looks like when you have subpoena power and access to financial intelligence, Tulsi explained to the camera. Money leaves banks that received federal assistance after Waters' intervention. That money goes through multiple shell companies and trusts. Then it emerges to purchase Waters' family real estate. The pattern repeats dozens of times over 20 years. She produced an FBI Organized Crime Division analysis that concluded Waters operated what amounted to a protection racket for minority-owned banks. Banks facing regulatory problems or needing federal assistance knew exactly who to call. They'd make campaign contributions, make business deals with your husband, or funnel money through community organizations you controlled. Then you'd use your position on the Financial Services Committee to solve their problems. Classic pay-to-play corruption. Waters sat motionless, watching the systematic destruction of her carefully constructed financial empire. Every property she'd bought, every business deal her husband had made, every dollar she thought was safely hidden, all of it exposed and documented. The Congressional Ethics Committee investigated you in 2010, Tulsi noted. But the investigation was buried after intense political pressure. The lead investigator was forced to resign. The findings were never made public. She held up a thick document. This is that ethics report, declassified today. It recommends criminal prosecution for bank fraud, conflict of interest violations, and abuse of public office. It was suppressed because of your political connections. Not anymore. The ethics report detailed everything. The One United Bank scheme, the pattern of steering federal money to campaign contributors, the unexplained real estate wealth, the family business deals that appeared to be laundering bribes. Congresswoman Waters, you spent 40 years getting rich off public service while your district remained mired in poverty, Tulsi declared. You sold your influence to the highest bidder while claiming to champion the poor. You're not a public servant. You're a racketeer who used congressional credentials as cover for organized crime. She closed the financial folder and reached for the second one, marked with FBI and Department of Homeland Security seals. But stolen money is the least of your crimes. Now let's discuss the Americans who died because of violence you incited for political gain. The second folder Tulsi opened contained something far worse than financial corruption. It contained photographs of dead bodies, crime scene reports, an autopsy, files documenting 30 years of violence connected to Maxine Waters' inflammatory rhetoric. Congresswoman Waters, you've spent 3 decades inciting violence whenever it served your political interests, Tulsi began, her voice heavy with the weight of American lives lost. Today we're going to count the bodies. She placed the first photograph on the table. Los Angeles, 1992, the city burning under columns of black smoke. The Rodney King riots, April 29 through May 4, 1992, 53 Americans killed, over 2,000 injured, 10,000 arrested, $1 billion in property damage. Los Angeles burned while the world watched. Tulsi produced news footage from 1992. Waters speaking to crowds as fires raged in the background. And what did you do during this crisis? Did you call for peace? Did you urge calm? Did you work to stop the violence? The video played Waters' actual words from press conferences during the riots. No justice, no peace. Waters' 1992 voice rang through the studio. I don't know how you stop individuals who feel they have no other recourse. This is a rebellion. This is what happens when people are frustrated. The footage continued, showing Waters at various riot locations, consistently refusing to condemn the violence. Reporter after reporter asked you to call for peace, Tulsi narrated over the footage. You explicitly refused. You called it a rebellion, not a riot. You said the violence was understandable. You gave rioters permission to destroy Los Angeles. The most damning clip played next. Waters at a press conference, reporters pleading with her to help stop the violence. Waters' voice from 1992. There are those who would like for me to tell people to go inside and be peaceful, that they have to accept the verdict. I'm not going to do that. The studio fell silent as America watched a congressional representative explicitly refusing to call for peace while her city burned. 53 Americans died, Congresswoman, Tulsi said, producing photographs of the victims. Here are their faces. One by one, the victims appeared on screen. Dwight Taylor, 42, small business owner shot protecting his store. Matthew Haynes, 32, firefighter killed by rioters. Edward Song Lee, 18, shot in crossfire while trying to reach his family. Each photograph was a dagger to Waters' political mythology. These people didn't die in a rebellion, Tulsi declared. They died in a riot that you encouraged and legitimized. You had the power to help stop the violence. You chose not to. Their blood is on your hands. FBI analysis appeared on screen showing how media coverage of Waters' rhetoric correlated with spikes in violence. Every time you appeared on television calling it a rebellion, calling it understandable, violence increased. Rioters heard a member of Congress giving them permission to destroy property and attack people. You were the political cover that allowed the violence to escalate. But 1992 was just the beginning of Waters' history of inciting violence. Fast forward to June 2018, Tulsi continued. The Trump administration's family separation policy at the border had sparked nationwide protests. And what did you tell your supporters to do? The video from a June 2018 rally played, Waters addressing a crowd with fiery rhetoric. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd, and you push back on them. Tell them they're not welcome anymore anywhere. The incitement was explicit and undeniable. Within 48 hours of that speech, 17 documented attacks occurred on Trump administration officials and their families, Tulsi revealed, producing police reports. Sarah Sanders was chased out of a restaurant by a mob. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was surrounded and harassed at a Mexican restaurant. Senator Ted Cruz and his wife were forced to leave a restaurant after protesters surrounded their table. Multiple administration staffers were confronted and threatened. Each incident was documented with police reports, witness statements, and video footage. You specifically told people to create crowds and push back. That's incitement. That's not protected political speech. That's instructing people to harass and intimidate. The legal analysis was clear. Waters had crossed the line from political criticism to incitement of harassment and potential violence. But the worst was yet to come, Tulsi said, her voice dropping to a tone of barely controlled fury. April 17, 2021, Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. Daunt Wright had been shot by police during a traffic stop. The city was already tense. Derek Chauvin's trial for George Floyd's murder was happening simultaneously in Minneapolis, just 10 miles away. Footage appeared of Minneapolis burning, businesses destroyed, police under siege. And you, Congresswoman Waters, traveled across state lines during this volatile situation. You went to Brooklyn Center and gave a speech that made everything worse. The video played, Waters addressing a crowd as darkness fell, protesters behind her, the atmosphere tense and dangerous. "We've got to stay on the street," Waters shouted in the footage. "We've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know we mean business." Tulsi let the words hang in the air. You told protesters in an already violent situation to get more confrontational, not more peaceful, not more focused on justice through the legal system, more confrontational. She produced a Department of Homeland Security intelligence assessment, created in the immediate aftermath of Waters' speech. DHS threat analysts warned that your rhetoric would lead to increased violence. They were right. Within hours of your speech, violence escalated dramatically. Minnesota National Guard troops were attacked. A drive-by shooting targeting their position left 2 soldiers injured. Military medical reports documented the injuries to American service members attacked after Waters told protesters to get more confrontational. These are American soldiers, Congresswoman, activated by their governor to maintain peace. And they were shot at because you told rioters to escalate. But the violence went far beyond that single shooting. Over the following 6 months, our intelligence agencies documented over 300 violent incidents directly linked to your get more confrontational rhetoric. 37 Americans killed, over 500 injured, $2 billion in property damage. The statistics were staggering, compiled from FBI, DHS, and local law enforcement sources nationwide. Violent extremist groups specifically cited your words as justification for their actions, Tulsi revealed. Antifa organizers shared videos of your speech with instructions to follow Maxine Waters' call to action. Black Lives Matter chapters used your words in their mobilization materials. You gave extremists political cover from a member of Congress. FBI counterterrorism analysis showed how Waters' speech had been weaponized by violent groups. We have communications intercepts from domestic terrorist organizations specifically planning violence around your public appearances because they know you'll provide political cover, Tulsi explained. They wait for you to speak, then they activate, knowing you'll call their violence understandable or a rebellion or confrontational protest. The pattern was undeniable and horrifying. Waters had become a trigger mechanism for violent extremists. "Let me read you something," Tulsi said, producing a victim impact statement. "This is from Maria Rodriguez, whose husband Jose owned a small grocery store in your district. During the 1992 riots, he tried to protect his business. He was beaten to death by a mob." Tulsi's voice cracked slightly as she read Maria's words. "My husband died because Maxine Waters told rioters their violence was a rebellion. He died because a member of Congress gave criminals permission to destroy our community. My children grew up without a father. I grew old without my husband. All because Maxine Waters needed political attention more than my family needed justice." More victim statements followed, each one a devastating indictment. From the family of Dwight Taylor, killed in 1992, Maxine Waters has blood on her hands. From the family of Matthew Haynes, the firefighter, she chose politics over American lives. From Sarah Chen, whose parents' business was destroyed in riots Waters incited, she got rich while our community burned. Dozens of victim statements, all pointing to the same conclusion. Maxine Waters had spent 30 years inciting violence that killed Americans and destroyed communities. But here's what makes it even more evil, Tulsi said, producing financial records that connected violence to profit. After each riot, after each outbreak of violence, property values in affected areas crashed. Buildings were abandoned. Businesses closed. And your network moved in to buy property at rock-bottom prices. The pattern was sickening. Property records showed that after the 1992 riots, LLCs connected to Waters and her associates purchased dozens of properties in riot-damaged areas for pennies on the dollar. You incited violence that destroyed communities and crashed property values. Then you profited from buying up the ruins, Tulsi declared. You're not a civil rights leader. You're a poverty pimp who profits from the destruction of the very communities you claim to represent. The evidence was overwhelming. 30 years of inflammatory rhetoric, hundreds of violent incidents, dozens of dead Americans, billions in property damage, and Maxine Waters profiting from it all. The FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and ATF conducted a joint assessment of your threat level, Tulsi revealed, producing the classified report. Their conclusion: Maxine Waters represents a clear and present danger to public safety through her continued incitement of violence for political gain. The official threat assessment recommended that Waters be prohibited from speaking at public gatherings without prior law enforcement notification due to the elevated risk of violence her presence creates. Congresswoman Waters, every riot you've incited, every business destroyed, every family torn apart by violence, it all served your political power and financial gain, Tulsi concluded. You built your career on the corpses of Americans who died in violence you encouraged. She closed the violence folder with finality. But domestic crimes are not the full extent of your betrayal. Tulsi reached for the third folder, this one marked with CIA, NSA, and FBI counterintelligence seals. Now let's discuss your relationships with foreign intelligence services, how you've sold American interests to our enemies, and why multiple foreign governments have active files listing you as a recruited intelligence asset. The third folder contained intelligence that elevated Waters' crimes from corruption and violence to outright treason. As Tulsi opened it, classification markings from multiple agencies showed the depth and breadth of the investigation. Congresswoman Waters, for 3 decades you've been selling American interests to foreign governments, criminal organizations, and intelligence services. Tulsi began. Today, the world learns that a sitting member of the United States Congress has been actively working as an asset for America's enemies. She produced the first document, a CIA intelligence assessment stamped with the highest classification levels. Let's start with the People's Republic of China, and specifically their Ministry of State Security, the MSS, China's primary intelligence agency. A photograph appeared on screen showing a document in Mandarin Chinese, with English translation overlay. This is a classified MSS file obtained through intelligence means I cannot discuss publicly. It identifies you by the code name Asset Beverly Hills. According to Chinese intelligence records, you were recruited in 1995 during a congressional delegation to Beijing. Waters' face had gone completely white. This was intelligence she never knew existed, evidence she had no idea America possessed. The recruitment followed classic foreign intelligence methodology, Tulsi continued. You were facing financial difficulties. Your husband's business ventures were failing. You had substantial personal debt. The Chinese offered a solution. She produced financial records showing suspicious transactions from the mid-1990s. Suddenly, your husband's businesses became profitable. Chinese investors started buying his products. Contributions to your campaign increased dramatically. You went from financial stress to security in less than 2 years. The financial transformation was stark and suspicious. Waters had gone from debt to wealth precisely when her relationship with Chinese interests began. All the Chinese wanted in return was friendship, Tulsi said with bitter irony. Friendship in the form of classified information from your committee assignments. Friendship in the form of advance notice of congressional actions affecting Chinese interests. Friendship in the form of using your position to protect Chinese operations in your district and across California. MSS communications appeared on screen, intercepted by NSA and translated by intelligence analysts. Asset Beverly Hills provided advance intelligence on Taiwan arms package. Recommend bonus payment through established channels. Asset Beverly Hills confirmed semiconductor export restrictions will be delayed at least 6 months due to her opposition. Her influence on committee remains strong. Asset Beverly Hills provided warning of upcoming sanctions on Chinese financial institutions. Recommend immediate asset transfers to avoid U.S. action. Each communication documented Waters providing intelligence to Chinese handlers. The pattern is consistent over 25 years, Tulsi explained. You receive classified briefings in your committee assignments. Within days, sometimes within hours, that classified information appears in Chinese intelligence communications. You were selling American secrets to China, but the intelligence relationship went beyond just passing information. China needed political protection for their operations in California, Tulsi continued. The port of Long Beach, the port of Los Angeles, these are critical infrastructure through which billions of dollars in Chinese goods flow every year. They're also potential vectors for intelligence operations, smuggling, and economic espionage. FBI counterintelligence reports appeared, documenting Chinese intelligence operations in Waters District. Every time law enforcement or intelligence agencies tried to investigate Chinese operations in your district, you interfered. You called it racial profiling. You accused agents of xenophobia. You used your position to shut down investigations. Specific cases appeared on screen. 2012, FBI tries to investigate Long Beach Import Corporation for potential technology smuggling. You hold a press conference denouncing racial profiling of Chinese businesses. Investigation ends. 2015, DHS raises concerns about Chinese nationals working at port facilities with access to critical infrastructure. You accuse them of anti-immigrant bias. Their access continues. 2019, FBI counterintelligence identifies multiple Chinese intelligence officers operating under business cover in your district. When they attempt surveillance, you're tipped off and warn the businesses they're targeting. The pattern of obstruction was undeniable. In 2019, the FBI discovered that 3 staff members in your congressional office had direct contact with identified Chinese intelligence officers, Tulsi revealed. When the FBI tried to investigate, you accused them of racial profiling and politically motivated harassment. Emails between Waters' chief of staff and a Chinese intelligence officer operating under diplomatic cover appeared on screen. The content redacted, but the sender and recipient information clearly visible. These are communications between your staff and a known MSS officer. They discuss upcoming legislation, committee schedules, and classified briefing topics. This is espionage, Congresswoman. But China wasn't Waters' only foreign patron. Now let's discuss your 30-year relationship with corrupt Haitian oligarchs and politicians. Tulsi continued, producing photographs of Waters meeting with Haitian officials later indicted for massive corruption. Between 2010 and 2023, you made 17 trips to Haiti. Officially, these were humanitarian missions. Actually, they were business trips for your criminal network. Surveillance photographs showed Waters meeting with known criminals, embracing corrupt politicians, touring properties owned by individuals under investigation for money laundering. After the 2010 earthquake, billions in international aid flowed into Haiti. Most of it disappeared, and you helped facilitate that theft. Treasury Department analysis showed money trails from Haitian earthquake relief funds to accounts controlled by oligarchs Waters had met with repeatedly. These Haitian businessmen needed a way to move stolen aid money into the U.S. financial system. You provided it through a network of nonprofits in your district. The financial architecture was sophisticated. Haitian oligarchs who'd stolen earthquake relief funds would donate to Waters-controlled nonprofits in Los Angeles. Those nonprofits would then purchase real estate or make other investments that benefited Waters' family and associates. The Maxine Waters Haiti Foundation received $3.2 million in donations from Haitian businessmen between 2010 and 2015, Tulsi revealed. These same businessmen were later charged with stealing earthquake relief funds. That money was supposed to help Haitian earthquake victims. Instead, it ended up in your network. IRS records showed that Waters Haiti Foundation spent less than $200,000 on actual Haiti relief. The rest went to administrative costs, including payments to Waters' family members. You used Haitian suffering as a money laundering operation, Tulsi declared with disgust. Earthquake victims died while you profited from stolen aid money. But the foreign corruption extended far beyond Haiti and China. Let's discuss your relationships with African dictators, Tulsi continued, producing photographs of Waters with some of Africa's most brutal leaders. Charles Taylor of Liberia, later convicted of war crimes. Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, responsible for thousands of opposition deaths. Paul Biya of Cameroon, ruling through violence and corruption for decades. You called Charles Taylor a freedom fighter and opposed his extradition to face war crimes charges, Tulsi noted. You praised Robert Mugabe's land reform policies while his opponents were being murdered. You defended Paul Biya as a voice for African sovereignty, while he imprisoned journalists and tortured dissidents. Each dictator had business interests in the United States that required political protection. Waters provided that protection in exchange for money that flowed through complex networks back to her associates. Financial analysis shows $2.3 million flowing from accounts controlled by these African governments to businesses and nonprofits connected to your network, Tulsi revealed. The money trails were documented with wire transfers, corporate filings, and Treasury Department analysis. But your most serious foreign betrayal involves the direct compromise of American military operations, Tulsi said, her voice hardening with barely controlled fury. She produced an NSA intelligence assessment marked with the highest classification levels. This is a comprehensive signals intelligence analysis covering 2015 to 2023. It tracks classified information from your committee briefings and correlates it with intelligence from foreign services. The analysis was devastating. June 2020, you receive a classified briefing on pending U.S. sanctions against specific Chinese banks. Within 72 hours, those banks have moved their assets to avoid the sanctions. Someone warned them. March 2021, classified briefing on DEA operations targeting Mexican cartel operations in California. Within 1 week, 3 major operations are canceled because the targets have disappeared. Someone tipped them off. September 2022, intelligence briefing on Iranian nuclear smuggling networks. Within days, those networks changed their operational patterns. Someone leaked the information. Each leak could be traced back to classified information Waters had access to. The pattern is consistent across dozens of instances over 8 years. You receive classified intelligence. That intelligence is compromised. American operations fail. Our enemies evade consequences. But the most damning evidence involved American deaths. May 2019, Tulsi said, her voice cracking with emotion. You attend a classified subcommittee briefing on special operations targeting Iranian proxy forces in Iraq. The briefing includes specific operational details about upcoming raids. She paused, her military bearing barely containing her fury. June 2019, 3 American special operations soldiers are killed in what should have been a routine raid. The Iranians knew we were coming. They set an ambush. 3 Americans died. Photographs of 3 young soldiers in uniform appeared on screen, their faces full of life and promise. Sergeant First Class Michael Chen, 28 years old. Staff Sergeant James Williams, 26. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, 24. They died in a firefight that never should have happened because someone sold out their mission. Tulsi's hands trembled slightly as she held the photographs, the only crack in her otherwise perfect military composure. NSA intercepts captured Iranian intelligence communications, celebrating their success. They reference receiving a warning from their congressional source. They specifically mention details that were only discussed in the classified briefing you attended. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Waters had access to the intelligence. The Iranians received a warning containing that exact intelligence. 3 Americans died. CIA estimates that intelligence leaks traceable to your access have contributed to the deaths of 47 American service members and intelligence assets over 20 years, Tulsi revealed, her voice barely above a whisper. 47 Americans who died because you sold their secrets to our enemies. Waters sat frozen, her political armor completely shattered. No race card could deflect this. No media protection could spin this away. 47 dead Americans was a body count that transcended politics. 3 months ago, we set a trap, Tulsi announced. A counterintelligence operation specifically designed to identify congressional leakers. We provided different classified information to different members, unique details that could trace back to specific sources. Waters' eyes widened in horror as she realized what was coming. The information provided only to you appeared in Chinese MSS communications within 72 hours. The information provided only to you appeared in Russian SVR traffic within 4 days. You're the leak, Congresswoman. We have you dead to rights. Tulsi stood, the full authority of the American intelligence community behind her. This morning, while you were preparing to destroy my reputation on television, federal agents were preparing to execute 17 simultaneous search warrants. Your home in Hancock Park, your congressional offices in Washington and Los Angeles, your fake community centers that launder gang money, the offices of your associates, all of it hit simultaneously. She checked her phone, new messages streaming in. As of 8 minutes ago, those raids are complete. Federal agents have seized encrypted communication devices, foreign currency, classified documents you illegally possessed, financial records documenting decades of corruption, and communications with foreign intelligence operatives. Waters looked like she might collapse. 40 years of criminal enterprise crashing down in a single morning. Maxine Waters, Tulsi declared with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence, you are a traitor. You sold American secrets to China, Russia, and Iran. You incited violence that killed dozens of Americans. You protected criminal networks that trafficked children. You stole millions in taxpayer money. Your 40-year reign of corruption ends today. She gathered her classified folders, the evidence of treason now public record. As Director of National Intelligence, I am formally declassifying all evidence of your crimes. The American people deserve to know that their Congress was infiltrated by someone who sold out her country for foreign money. Tulsi looked directly into the camera, speaking to millions of Americans watching this unprecedented moment. To every American who's wondered why your government seems broken, why politicians get rich while you struggle, why justice appears to apply differently to the powerful than to everyone else. This is why. People like Maxine Waters have spent decades looting your country, selling your secrets, and destroying your communities while hiding behind political protection and media complicity. She turned back to Waters, who sat motionless, destroyed. The Department of Justice is filing formal charges within the hour. Bank fraud, conflict of interest violations, incitement to riot, obstruction of justice, violations of the Espionage Act, and treason. 40 years of crimes, all documented, all provable, all going to result in prosecution. Scarborough and Brzezinski remained silent, journalists witnessing history but too stunned to formulate questions. This had stopped being an interview thousands of words ago. This was a public execution of political corruption. Congresswoman Waters, do you have anything to say? Tulsi asked, offering one final chance for response. Waters' mouth opened and closed silently. No words emerged. What could she possibly say? The evidence was overwhelming. The documentation was irrefutable. Her crimes had been exposed to the world. Finally, weakly, Waters managed a single sentence. I want my lawyer. That's probably wise, Tulsi responded coldly. You're going to need a very good one. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, the political earthquake rippled across America. Social media exploded with clips of the confrontation. News organizations scrambled to verify the evidence. Congressional offices went into crisis mode. The Department of Justice prepared for the prosecution of the century. Federal agents escorted Maxine Waters from the MSNBC studios in handcuffs, perp-walking a sitting congresswoman for the first time in modern American history. Photographers captured every moment, the images instantly iconic. Waters, who'd entered the studio that morning as a powerful committee chairwoman ready to destroy an enemy, left as a criminal defendant facing life in prison. The raids on Waters' properties yielded exactly what Tulsi had promised. In Waters' Hancock Park mansion, agents found over $400,000 in cash, some of it in Chinese yuan and other foreign currencies. They found encrypted communication devices that forensic analysis would later prove had been used to contact foreign intelligence operatives. They found classified documents she had no legal right to possess, marked with the highest security classifications. In her congressional offices, agents seized computers containing evidence of 20 years of financial crimes. Her staff, realizing the empire was collapsing, began cooperating with federal prosecutors. Marcus, her chief of staff who'd served her for 17 years, provided detailed testimony about her foreign contacts, her money laundering operations, and her systematic obstruction of law enforcement investigations. The fake community centers Waters had used to launder gang money were exposed as criminal fronts. Federal agents arrested 17 gang leaders and their associates who'd used Waters' political protection to traffic drugs, guns, and children through South Central Los Angeles. DEA agents simultaneously hit cartel operations that had operated freely in Waters' district for decades. Within 72 hours, 43 people connected to Waters' criminal network were in federal custody. Within a week, 12 had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. The conspiracy was unraveling at every level. Congressional reaction was swift and brutal. The House Ethics Committee, which had protected Waters for decades, suddenly found the courage to recommend immediate expulsion. The vote wasn't close. 397 members voted to expel Maxine Waters from Congress. Only 8 voted against, and even they issued statements condemning her actions while citing procedural concerns. The Democratic Party, which had elevated Waters to committee chairmanships and celebrated her as a civil rights icon, scrambled to distance itself from the wreckage. Press releases condemned her actions. Former allies deleted social media posts praising her. Political donations from her network were quietly returned. President Trump, speaking from the White House, praised Tulsi Gabbard's courage in exposing congressional corruption. "Director Gabbard is a true American hero," he declared. "She took an oath to defend this country, and today she proved that oath means something." Maxine Waters betrayed America for foreign money, and thanks to Tulsi Gabbard's bravery, justice is finally coming. The intelligence community, often criticized as a deep state working against elected officials, found itself praised for uncovering a genuine threat within Congress. The CIA, NSA, and FBI received rare public commendations for their work documenting Waters' crimes. International reactions varied. China issued a formal denial of any intelligence relationship with Waters, calling the accusations baseless slander. Within days, however, American intelligence released intercepted communications that proved Chinese statements were lies. Beijing went silent afterward. Russia similarly denied any contact with Waters. Those denials were equally demolished by declassified intelligence, showing Russian intelligence files on useful idiot Waters and her reliable support for Russian geopolitical positions. Iran, already under intense international pressure, refused to comment at all, recognizing that acknowledging an intelligence relationship with an American congresswoman would invite military consequences. The most emotional responses came from military families. The families of the 47 Americans whose deaths were linked to Waters' intelligence leaks demanded justice. Gold Star families held press conferences. Veterans organizations called for the death penalty. Military social media erupted with fury that a congresswoman had gotten their brothers and sisters killed. The family of Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, killed in the 2019 Iraq ambush, filed a civil lawsuit against Waters seeking damages for wrongful death. Their attorney argued that Waters' leak of classified information directly caused the ambush that killed their daughter. Similar lawsuits followed from other military families. Victims of the violence Waters had incited over 3 decades organized a class action lawsuit. Business owners who'd lost everything in the 1992 riots. Families of Americans killed in violence Waters had encouraged. Communities destroyed by gang activity she protected. Thousands of plaintiffs seeking billions in damages. The legal machinery moved with unusual speed. Federal prosecutors, armed with overwhelming evidence, secured indictments on 43 separate charges within 2 weeks. The indictment read like a crime novel: bank fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, bribery, conflict of interest violations, obstruction of justice, incitement to riot, conspiracy against the United States, violations of the Espionage Act, and treason. Waters' attorneys, a team of the most expensive criminal defense lawyers in America, filed motions to dismiss based on legislative immunity and claiming the evidence was obtained through illegal surveillance. Federal judges rejected every motion. The evidence was overwhelming and legally obtained. The trial, held in federal court in Washington, D.C., became the most watched legal proceeding since the O.J. Simpson case. Every day brought new devastating revelations. Witnesses testified about Waters' corruption. Intelligence analysts explained how her leaks compromised operations. Military families described their losses. Financial experts documented her money laundering networks. Waters' defense strategy collapsed under the weight of evidence. Her attorneys tried to claim she'd been entrapped, that the intelligence community had manufactured evidence, that racial bias motivated the prosecution. Prosecutors destroyed each argument with documentary evidence, intercepted communications, and testimony from cooperating witnesses. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned guilty verdicts on 41 of 43 charges. Waters sat motionless as the verdicts were read, her face a mask of disbelief that her empire had finally fallen. Sentencing came 3 months later. The federal judge, a Barack Obama appointee who'd once been considered sympathetic to Waters, showed no mercy. "Maxine Waters, you held a position of sacred trust," the judge declared from the bench. "The American people elected you to represent them, to serve their interests, to uphold the Constitution. Instead, you betrayed everything you swore to defend. You sold American secrets to our enemies. You incited violence that killed dozens of your fellow citizens. You protected criminals who trafficked children. You stole millions meant for the poor. Your crimes are so extensive and so egregious that I can conceive of no sentence other than the maximum allowed by law. The sentence: life in federal prison without possibility of parole, plus 450 years on the additional counts, to be served consecutively. Restitution of $18 million to victims. Forfeiture of all assets obtained through criminal activity." Maxine Waters, who'd ruled South Central Los Angeles like a queen for 40 years, would die in prison. But the story didn't end with Waters' conviction. The exposure of her 40-year criminal enterprise triggered a broader reckoning. Congressional ethics investigations expanded to other members who'd used similar tactics. The FBI opened investigations into suspicious relationships between other congressmen and foreign interests. The intelligence community implemented new protocols to detect congressional leaks. Most importantly, the American people's faith in accountability was partially restored. For decades, citizens had watched politicians grow wealthy through obvious corruption, protected by partisan politics and media complicity. Maxine Waters' fall proved that no one was above the law when the evidence was overwhelming and the prosecutors were determined. Tulsi Gabbard became a national hero. Her approval rating soared. Military families called her a champion of accountability. Reform advocates praised her courage. Even her political opponents grudgingly acknowledged that she'd done what many thought impossible: exposed and destroyed congressional corruption at the highest levels. In South Central Los Angeles, Waters' former district, reactions were complex. Some residents who'd benefited from her constituent services over decades felt betrayed by the revelations. Others, who'd watched their communities crumble while Waters grew wealthy, felt vindicated. Many expressed relief that the gangs and criminals Waters had protected were finally facing justice. The special election to replace Waters brought new leadership to the district. A reform candidate, running on transparency and accountability, won in a landslide. Her first act in Congress was to introduce legislation requiring financial disclosure for all congressional family members and stricter penalties for conflicts of interest. Years later, historians would identify the Waters prosecution as a turning point in American politics. The moment when the intelligence community's documentation capabilities combined with political will to expose corruption at the highest levels. The moment when 40 years of criminal behavior finally faced consequences. In federal prison, Maxine Waters maintained her innocence to the end. She gave occasional interviews claiming she'd been targeted for being a strong black woman, that racial bias had motivated her prosecution, that she was a political prisoner. But without the media platform she'd enjoyed for decades, without the political protection she'd wielded for 40 years, her claims fell on deaf ears. The evidence was too overwhelming, the documentation too complete, the victims too numerous. History would remember Maxine Waters not as a civil rights icon, but as a corrupt politician who betrayed her country, her constituents, and her oath of office for personal gain. And history would remember Tulsi Gabbard as the warrior who brought her down. The combat veteran who understood that defending America sometimes meant exposing its domestic enemies. The intelligence director who had access to everything and used that access to deliver justice. That MSNBC interview, that 40-minute confrontation that destroyed a congressional career and exposed 40 years of corruption, became required viewing in law schools, military academies, and intelligence training programs. A masterclass in how to systematically dismantle corruption with evidence, documentation, and unwavering commitment to truth. The classified folders Tulsi had brought to that studio became exhibits in the trial, then artifacts in the National Archives. Future generations would study them, understanding how one woman's corruption had metastasized over decades, and how another woman's courage had finally ended it. In the end, the story of Maxine Waters and Tulsi Gabbard became a modern American parable, a reminder that corruption, no matter how well protected, cannot withstand the light of truth. That betrayal, no matter how long it persists, will eventually face accountability. That criminals in congressional offices are still criminals, and justice, though delayed, can still arrive. Maxine Waters had thought she was untouchable. She'd survived scandals, investigations, and accusations for 40 years. She'd grown rich off public service while her district remained poor. She'd sold American secrets to foreign enemies while wrapping herself in the flag. She'd incited violence that killed Americans while claiming to champion justice. But she'd made one fatal miscalculation. She'd attacked someone who had access to everything, the skills to use that information effectively, and the courage to expose corruption regardless of political cost. Tulsi Gabbard had kept her oath. She defended America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And when a domestic enemy sat across from her on live television and called her a traitor, Tulsi had responded with the full force of American justice. The reckoning had come, the empire had fallen, and America was reminded that accountability, though rare, was still possible. If you enjoyed this story of political justice and want more content exposing corruption and celebrating accountability, smash that like button and subscribe. Because the fight for transparency and truth never ends, and we're committed to bringing you every story of corruption exposed and justice delivered. This is what happens when power meets accountability, when corruption meets truth, when a traitor meets a warrior. This is what justice looks like in America.